My name is Karen Mitchell. I'm 30 years old, and that Sunday evening I walked straight into an ambush disguised as family dinner. The second I stepped into my parents' house in suburban Atlanta, I knew something was wrong. My mom's smile looked glued on, my dad sat stiff like a judge, and my younger sister Kimberly kept squirming in her seat like she had a secret she couldn't wait to spill. The table was dressed up like Christmas morning, crystal glasses, polished silverware, fresh flowers. Too much effort, too perfect. And what they had prepared for me nearly made me choke on my first sip of wine. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And hit like and subscribe, because this story will change the way you look at family forever. I noticed it the moment I sat down, a thick blue folder parked beside my father's plate like a guest no one had introduced. It was the color of a police light, impossible to ignore. He just let it sit there, a quiet threat in cardstock. We made small talk for exactly 2 minutes, weather, traffic on I-85, the lilies. Then Mom cleared her throat and smoothed her napkin with that careful, hostessy sweep. Family matters should stay in the family, she said, all sugar on top, steel underneath. My father nodded, eyes on me. We've been thinking about the future of your clinic. There it was the turn. The room seemed to hush even though no one else was talking. I took a sip of wine that slid down wrong and sat in my chest like a hot coin. My clinic? I asked, as if there were another one they could be talking about. Kimberly straightened in her chair, bright and glowing, palms pressed to the edge of the table. We put together a plan, she said, and the word we did a little dance in my head. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking at our parents, at their approval, like a student giving a presentation she'd practiced in the mirror. I'll become the practice manager. You'll do what you do best, hands-on with patients, focusing on care. I'll handle the office, scheduling, billing, vendor contracts, marketing. She tilted her head, a smile that begged for applause. Streamline everything. No one lifted a fork. Even the clock over the pantry door chose that second to stop ticking. My father slid the blue folder an inch forward with 2 stiff fingers, as if to underline her speech. We had a lawyer friend draft some ideas, he said. Structure. Roles. Safeguards. Mom chimed in, voice honeyed. You know how complicated business can be, sweetie. You're such a healer, people adore you, but the numbers and the management? That's heavy. Our family can share the load. I stared at the lilies. A pollen fleck had fallen onto the tablecloth and made a tiny yellow star. And by share, I said slowly, you mean? Kimberly's smile widened. Compensation would reflect responsibilities, naturally. You're the clinician. I'm the manager. So you'd get 75% of the profits. 75. That's generous. Most practices split 50-50 between clinical and admin. She said it like she'd discovered gravity. My glass was halfway to my mouth again before I realized I'd moved. The Chardonnay smelled like pears and oak and something too sweet. 75%, I repeated as if trying a new language. Dad folded his hands. We're being practical. Your time is best spent treating patients. Paperwork steals your focus and drains your energy. Kimberly's great with people. She's got ideas for social media, referral programs, partnerships with local gyms. And the website needs a refresh, Kimberly cut in. Online booking that actually works, not that clunky thing. And we could offer memberships, you know, like monthly wellness packages. Plus, I can negotiate better rates on supplies. Vendors always give me deals. Mom nodded fast, bracelets clinking. Yes, we'd keep it all in the family. No strangers controlling anything. That's important. The blue folder stared back at me. The edges were crisp. Someone had taken time to make this look official. I could see tab sections through the pocket. Agreement, roles, compensation, projections. There was even a post-it peeking out, a cheerful pink rectangle that said sign in my father's blocky handwriting. My tongue felt thick. So the plan is that I do the clinical work and Kimberly runs the business. Exactly, Dad said, relieved that I'd understood. Best of both worlds. And you think 75% of profits to me is fair? Kimberly gave a little laugh, like I'd made a cute joke. It's more than fair. Think about how much more you'd take home if I grew the revenue. I've already sketched out a calendar for promotions. New year, new you physical therapy reboot. Corporate wellness contracts. A referral bonus. And I can handle hiring. Interviews. Onboarding. She glanced at the folder, then back at me. It's all there. Mom's voice softened. Honey, you're exhausted. We can see it. The clinic has plateaued. It happens. Let us help. A plateau. The word thudded against my ribs. The chandelier hummed, maybe it was just in my head, and the crystals threw tiny lights across the table, little glittering lies. What does practice manager mean, specifically? I asked. Day to day. Kimberly launched into it like she'd been waiting to impress an investor. I'd oversee all front desk operations, billing and collections, payroll, vendor relationships, HR, marketing, community outreach. I'd supervise hires, approve schedules, and design workflows so you don't have to touch any of that. You just treat. She leaned forward. And I'd be the point person for any important decisions. Point person, I echoed. Decisions like budgets, Dad said. Growth strategy. Office hours. Insurance contracts. We don't want you distracted. You're the talent. The talent. I let the words hover between us, glossy and empty. Somewhere in the kitchen, the oven clicked as it cooled. And the 75%? I said, keeping my voice even. That's net profits after expenses. Of course, Dad said. After reasonable administrative costs. We've itemized them. Kimberly nodded eagerly. Software subscriptions, marketing spend, office improvements, just the things it takes to run smoothly. But that's the point, Karen. You won't have to worry about any of it. You'll have stability. Predictability. Freedom to focus on what you love. Mom added softly, you deserve that, sweetheart. I imagine the neat paragraphs inside, the tiny font that always hides the teeth. My throat tightened, and I covered it with another sip of wine that slid the wrong way again. Kimberly glanced at Dad, then back to me with a bright, coaxing smile. We could start next month. I've already drafted a transition timeline. All you have to do is sign. I almost choked on my wine. I stared at the blue folder, but what I really saw were the stale air of night shifts in Florida. I was 23, a new nurse who learned how to be awake when the world slept. Coffee that tasted like burnt pennies, charting at 3 a.m. with my shoes sticking to floors that never felt clean, code blues that shook me awake better than any caffeine ever could. On my days off, I didn't actually rest. I picked up another shift, because the interest on my loans didn't. $156,000, every number stamped across my future. I'd lie in my rented room, listening to the scratching in the walls, and tell myself they were tree branches, not cockroaches. Then I'd flip on the light and watch the truth scatter. The room was $475 a month, utilities included if you didn't count dignity. A mattress on a metal frame, a thrifted dresser that smelled like someone else's perfume, a fan that hummed like a tired mother. Kimberly called often those first years late, breathless, a background of laughter in her dorm. Can you spot me till next week? Next week became next month, then I'll pay you back when I get my refund. I sent money anyway. I sent it when it meant my dinner was a packet of ramen without the seasoning, when it meant I'd choose between gas or laundry. I told myself I was investing in family, that moms were right when they said, what goes around comes around. When I got into grad school, no one in the family made a fuss. Physical therapy? Mom said, tilting her head like the word was a smudge she might wipe away. Seems small. Dad smiled in that weary, indulgent way. Childish nonsense, Karen. You're good with patience, sure, but real careers have ladders. They saved their applause for Kimberly's major change announcements, communications to marketing to taking a semester to find myself. She was brave for pivoting, savvy for networking. I was steady, which was just another way of saying invisible. The loans ballooned. I worked weekends, picked up relief shifts, drove an hour to a clinic that paid $2 more per hour if I covered their graveyard admissions. I studied in my car between patients, the pages of my notes curling from humid breath. On Sundays, I called home from the staff parking lot, speakerphone balanced on a Tupperware of cold rice. Mom would rave about Kim's internship at a boutique PR firm. Dad would list the names of people she'd met at a gala. When I mentioned that I'd passed another board exam, Mom hummed like she'd heard a weather update. Yes, yes, looks like rain. By the time I opened the clinic, I had a spreadsheet brain and a body that flinched at late-night noises. I knew the cost of everything down to lamp bulbs and toner cartridges. I knew which insurer paid on time and which liked to pretend signatures vanished in transit. I knew how to talk to a patient whose pain wasn't just in the joint but in the rent, the custody battle, the final notice on the utility bill. The summer Kimberly helped, I tried to believe we'd turn a corner. She arrived with iced coffee and the posture of a boss. She wanted a desk and a title. I gave her a badge and a task list. At first, she was charming. She called patients Han, offered water bottles, made the waiting room playlist feel like a salon. Then the seam split. Kimberly started giving friends and family discounts to anyone who recognized her from college, from Instagram, from a parking garage once. She comped visits for girls who needed a pick-me-up, shaved copays because these forms are so annoying, and created package deals she never told me about. I found out when a college acquaintance showed up demanding her summer slim-down PT bundle, which apparently included taping, manual therapy, and an Instagram before/after, all for a price we'd never survive. She flipped schedules like pancakes. A doctor's referral got bumped for a sorority sister who needed to be in a dress by Friday. She double-booked 4 evals on a morning when I had a post-op knee scheduled for a tower session. Patients waited 3 hours because she'd blocked a fake lunch for herself while she went to pick up boutique candles to improve the brand vibe. 3 hours, and I got to watch a man grit his teeth through pain he had postponed treating for months because he thought the clinic would run like a normal clinic. I stayed late that week, calling every patient who'd walked out, apologizing for systems changes and human error. I met my sister, but I also met me. I had let love talk me into lowering the guard I built with cockroaches and overdrafts. I ordered pizza for the staff, sat with the front desk until after dark, rebuilt the week in the scheduling software, and wrote scripts for apology calls. I gave Kimberly one last list: no discounts without my sign-off, no schedule edits without checking the color-coded constraints, no comped services ever. She pouted, then posted a boomerang of her stapler with the caption "Boss Mode." The next day, I found a stack of sticky notes that said penciled in on top of names that weren't on the calendar. "Don't worry," she told me, twirling a pen. "They're flexible." But pain isn't flexible. The math isn't flexible when I'm paying rent on a space that needs every hour to function. I learned that my sister, who could charm a room on arrival, could also torch months of carefully built trust in an afternoon. When she left for a better opportunity in late July, she hugged staff she'd barely learned the names of and told me, "You'll thank me when the brand grows." What grew was my list of apologies and my clarity. I had carried my family on my back across state lines and night shifts, over the hum of an ancient fan and the chorus of insects I pretended not to hear. I had carried their pride when it was aimed at someone else and their scorn when it was aimed at me. Looking at that blue folder, I felt the old Florida heat rise in my chest, the heat that trained me to keep moving when I was too tired to stand. They thought I'd forget all of it. But I didn't. My father slid the blue folder across the polished mahogany table with the solemnity of a judge delivering a sentence. "Here," he said, his voice deep and self-satisfied, "a contract drafted by a lawyer I trust. Everything is outlined clearly. Once you sign, we can move forward as a true team." Kimberly leaned in as though she had already rehearsed the scene in her head, me nodding, them celebrating, champagne poured. My mother's fake smile stretched tighter across her face, though the twitching of her fingers on the linen napkin betrayed her nerves. I didn't touch the folder. Instead, I reached down to my bag, unzipped it slowly, and placed a black leather folder on the table. I heard Kimberly's sharp intake of breath. My father's eyes narrowed, suspicious, but still confident. 3 weeks ago, I said, my voice calm and deliberate, I signed an agreement with Southern Medical Alliance. The name landed like a hammer. Kimberly blinked, confused. My father's jaw twitched, but he tried to keep his composure. My mother sat up straighter, as if her spine could hold the situation together by sheer will. I continued before they could interrupt. According to that agreement, All administrative processes, billing, scheduling, HR, compliance, are now handled by their professional team. And under the terms of the contract, no family members may hold management positions. None. Silence followed. The chandelier above us seemed to hum louder, its crystals catching the light like tiny sparks. My father's face drained of color, the pink flush of authority replaced by the pale mask of shock. His fingers, still resting on the blue folder, stiffened until his knuckles blanched. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Across from him, my mother clenched her napkin so tightly that I thought it might rip. Her polished nails dug into the fabric, the motion almost violent. Kimberly, however, broke into laughter, the nervous, disbelieving kind. "You're joking," she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Southern Medical Alliance? Karen, come on. They don't just sign contracts with small clinics like yours." I leaned forward, sliding the black folder toward her. "Do you want to read it?" She faltered, her smirk fading when she saw the Alliance logo stamped at the top of the first page. She didn't touch it. "I don't understand," my father muttered finally, his voice lower now. "Why would you do this without discussing it with us?" "Because it's my clinic," I said simply. "I built it. I paid the debts. I treated the patients. And I decided how to protect it from interference." I let the word hang in the air, directed squarely at him. My mother inhaled sharply, but I pressed on. "This partnership gives me, access to resources I could never afford alone. Compliance specialists, billing experts, marketing support. And yes, protection from family management experiments." Kimberly bristled. "So what, you just locked us out? You didn't even give us a chance." I looked at her steady. "You had a chance. Remember last summer? 3-hour wait times, missed appointments, fake discounts for your friends? Patients complained. Staff nearly quit. That was your chance." Her cheeks turned crimson, but she stayed quiet this time. My father finally pushed the untouched blue folder away as though it had suddenly become toxic. His lips pressed into a thin line. "You blindsided us," he said, almost to himself. "No," I corrected, my tone sharp now. "You tried to blindside me. You set this dinner up like an ambush, with your contracts and plans and perfect table settings. But I came prepared." The weight of my words settled over the room. For once, they had no rehearsed counterargument. My mother's voice broke the silence, trembling yet defiant. "Family decisions should be made together, Karen. You don't just run off and—" "I didn't run off," I interrupted, my voice firmer than I expected. "I planned. I strategized. I did exactly what you always claimed Kimberly was so talented at doing, except I executed it properly. And now the clinic is safe. From competitors. From errors. And yes, from this family's interference." My father's hands trembled as he lifted his glass of water, though he didn't drink. He stared at me as if trying to recognize the daughter he thought he controlled. I closed the leather folder gently and slid it back into my bag. "This conversation is over," I said, my voice final. "And the contract is binding." The room stayed heavy with the truth of it. For the first time in my life, the balance of power at that table had shifted permanently. Then I reached into my bag and set another folder on the table, overstuffed, its spine bowed from weeks of compiling. I opened it slowly so they could see the tabs, complaints, billing errors, discrepancies. I began laying pages out across the linen like cards in a game none of them knew how to play. "Patient complaints," I said, tapping the first stack. 3 separate mornings where the first appointments waited over an hour because you arrived late and overrode the schedule to fit in friends. Here, Mrs. Holloway, post-op rotator cuff, sat until her arm went numb. She wrote that she almost drove herself to urgent care from the waiting room. Kimberly's mouth pinched. "People exaggerate." I didn't look up. "Billing errors." I nudged the next pile forward. "Discounts you weren't authorized to give. Notes saying family rate for people who share no last name with us. Bundled services comped without documentation. 14 claims denied because the codes didn't match what was provided, all entered on your initials. The insurer flagged our account in July. Do you know how many hours it took to unwind this?" My father swallowed. "Karen, let's not." But I kept going. Discrepancies. The third tab. Double-booked evaluations. 2 patients checked in for the same slot, both marked confirmed. An ACL pre-rehab bumped for a sorority sister who wanted taping for a photo shoot. That sister left a 5-star review on your Instagram. The post is still up. Kimberly's chair creaked as she shifted. It was marketing. No, it was negligence, I said. And it cost us. I turned to another page. This is a reconciliation report from our software and bank deposits. The gap is almost $8,000 over 3 months. Not theft, I added, seeing my father stiffen. Sloppiness. Lost copays, uncollected deductibles, appointments never invoiced because you saved them to finish later. But later never came. The chandelier threw cold light across the paper. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the soft clink of my mother's bracelet as her hand trembled. I laid down a final sheet from the first section. A voicemail transcription, I said. Mr. Nelson, 72. I waited 2 hours with my knee brace cutting into my skin. The young woman told me it would be worth it for the vibe. I don't need vibe. I need my leg to work. He didn't come back. He went to a competitor down the street. Kimberly let out a small, breathy laugh, the kind that always tried to turn shame into a joke. You really saved everything? Yes, I said. Because someone had to. I closed the first folder and placed a second one on top, slimmer, clip-bound, precise. This is the other piece, I said, sliding it toward my father. 3 years' worth of internal invoices marked no charge. My mother's eyes flicked up. No charge. For family, I said. Let me walk you through it. I turned the pages one by one. Mom, lumbar strain and recurrent spasms. 43 sessions across 18 months. Manual therapy, therapeutic exercise, heat, and e-stim. Standard rate, $135 per session. Total, $5,805. Her hand went to her lower back, a reflex. The bracelet clinked again. Dad, post-operative rehabilitation after your rotator cuff repair. Twice a week for 16 weeks, plus a re-eval and home program upgrades. We billed nothing. At the contracted rate with your insurer, that course of care would have totaled $11,520. My father stared at the numbers as if they might blink and change. Kimberly, sports injuries. I paused, watching her eyes sharpen as if bracing for impact. Ankle sprain from that bar class challenge, patellar tendinopathy after the 10K, shoulder impingement from push-up month. Taping before 3 half marathons you didn't finish, cupping for content, and last-minute manual treatment before trips. 78 separate visits. I slid the page across. If you'd been anyone else, it would have been $21,675. No way, she muttered, but the totals were printed in clean black ink. I placed the summary sheet on top, the one I had printed last, with the number centered and bold. Combined, $39,000. I let it sit there, simple and heavy. That's what I comped for this family. Without a single thank you card. My mother's lips parted. Karen. I slept on couches at the clinic, I said softly, as much to the papers as to them. On winter nights when the heating bill scared me, when the loan payment hit the same week 3 insurers delayed remittances. I showered with the staff before opening, wore the same scrubs twice, and ate protein bars scavenged from vendor samples. I did all that while you were being treated at my expense. A pulse beat in my throat. I stacked the pages with careful hands. The thing about a clinic, I added, is that reputation is oxygen. And you polluted it. Not maliciously, maybe, but chaos is still chaos to a patient in pain. Kimberly's eyes flashed. You act like I tried to ruin you. I was helping. I turned the complaints toward her again. Read the names. Say them out loud if it helps. These people didn't get what they needed because you wanted to feel important behind a desk. My father cleared his throat and reached for the water glass, then set it down untouched. This could have been handled privately, Karen. It was handled privately, I said. For months. I fixed what I could, called every person who walked out, apologized for errors I didn't make. I didn't bring it here to humiliate anyone. I brought it because you sat me down with a blue folder and called it a plan. But plans start with the truth. I gathered the 3 piles: complaints, billing errors, discrepancies, and aligned their edges. The room felt colder now, as if the air conditioning had clicked on without anyone noticing. The cost wasn't just money, I said, quieter. It was trust. I earned it the hard way. And I won't watch it be spent like pocket change. They were the first to blink. And then my father cleared his throat with that managerial cough he used when a meeting went sideways. All right, he said, sliding the blue folder back as if retreating under white flag. Not 75. 60. We try it for 6 months and revisit. He sounded generous, like a banker forgiving a fee. My mother nodded so quickly her earrings clicked. Kimberly tugged the hem of her cardigan and attempted a smile that didn't survive her own reflection in my evidence. 60's reasonable, Mom rushed in. A pilot phase. If it doesn't feel right, we adjust. We're being flexible, Karen. Kimberly leaned forward as if we were girlfriends swapping weekend plans. You stay with patients. I do the heavy lifting in the office. We all win. 6 months goes fast. Something in me snapped back to the rented Florida room with cockroaches scattering under the light, to the spreadsheets I held like rosary beads at 2 a.m., to the apology calls I made after Kimberly's calendar stunts. I pushed my chair back so fast it scraped the hardwood. No. The word cracked through the dining room. 3 faces flinched. For once, I didn't soften it. The clinic is not your piggy bank, I said, standing so they had to look up at me. I built it from scratch, every lamp, every resistance band, every insurance contract fought line by line. You didn't invest a penny, and now you want a piece like it's a pie cooling in the window. My father's mouth tightened. Karen, there's no need to dramatize. From this day forward, I continued, no more free procedures. If you want treatment, you make an appointment and you pay like everyone else. Mom's hands flew up, the universal sign for outrage at a daughter gone rogue. How can you put money above family? It's not money above family, I said, feeling my pulse steady with the truth. It's humanity above your exploitation. Silence thudded down. It wasn't the melodramatic, door-slamming kind. It was the kind where air gets dense and people hear their own heartbeat. Dad tried again, lower, reasonable. You're too emotional. We can redesign the roles. No titles for Kimberly, just oversight. Family oversight. 60% isn't a carve-out, it's compensation for your. It's a leash, I snapped. A velvet one, sure. But a leash is still a leash. Kimberly crossed her arms. You act like we're robbing you. We're offering structure. You hate admin work. I'm good with people. You're good at being liked for 5 minutes, I said quietly. Then the bill lands. Her lips parted, wounded pride mixing with a flicker of anger. Wow. So I'm just dead weight to you. I exhaled through my nose. You're my sister. And I'm done letting sister mean secretary of my boundaries. My mother reached for her wine, then set it down untouched. Family share. That's what we taught you. You taught me that Kimberly's wants outrank my needs, I said. You taught me to be useful first and a daughter second. I'm unteaching it. Dad's gaze hardened. If you shut us out, don't expect us to show up when you need help. I needed help when I slept on the clinic couch to make payroll, I said. You showed up for taping before Kimberly's races. Kimberly bristled. But you spelled my name wrong on the race bib that one time. Remember it? I actually laughed, short and sharp. There it is. Somewhere in the kitchen, the ice maker coughed. I placed both palms on the back of my chair and leaned in, not to threaten, but to anchor myself. Okay, here are the new rules, I said, measured, even. No one speaks about the clinic as a family business. No more inquiries to my partners. No deals behind my back. If you need therapy, you book it. You pay. If you need a favor, you ask, and the answer might be no. Mom blinked like I'd switched languages. But you can't put contracts between blood. You put expectations there first, I said. I'm just labeling the jar you already filled. Dad's jaw worked. And if we can't accept these rules, then nothing changes for me, I said. Only for you. Kimberly's voice found a pleading register. Karen, you're going to regret making this a war. It's not a war, I replied. It's a fence. You stay on your side, and I'll thrive on mine. My father gathered the blue folder as if it were the last shield he had left. You'll wish you'd taken 60 when the Alliance starts telling you how to run your own shop. They already do, I said. And they're better at it than any of us. He searched for the old script, lecture, sigh, paternal verdict, but the pages were blank now. My mother shook her head slowly, as if disappointment might topple me where anger had failed. You've become hard, she said. I've become clear, I answered. I tucked my folders into my bag and pulled the strap over my shoulder. The chair I'd pushed back was still tilted, like a punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence I'd finally finished writing. I looked at each of them, one by one, the man who always loved control more than conversation, the woman who mistook sacrifice for duty, the sister who wore entitlement like perfume. I didn't hate them. That would have been easier. I simply stopped volunteering to be harvested. Mom made one more attempt, a softer dagger. If Grandma were alive, she'd be ashamed to see you talk to us like this. If Grandma were alive, she'd tell you to stop counting my money and start counting your blessings. My father stood, too, perhaps out of habit, perhaps to meet me at eye level. Doors always open, he said, which sounded suspiciously like doors that way. I know, I said. And it swings both directions. I turned toward the hallway. Behind me, the dining room, crystal, lilies, Christmas silver in September, held its breath. I paused at the threshold and added, without ceremony, I'll send you the new patient portal link. You'll need a card on file. Kimberly gasped like I'd slapped her. My mother muttered something about betrayal. My father said nothing at all, which told me I'd finally reached the only part of him that understood numbers. 0 access, 0 leverage, 0 control. I walked out, past the family photos, down the steps where I'd once lugged donated equipment into my trunk, through the air that smelled faintly of denial. On the porch, the evening was ordinary and the kind of night you only notice when you've survived a performance. I held the railing a second, let my heart decelerate, and felt the strangest sensation, a space. But something old and raw pressed against my ribs. I turned back to them and the blue folder that had just lost its power, and I let the words I'd swallowed for years finally climb out. You know what this really is? I said. It's not about contracts. It's about a family that only notices me when there's a bill to pay. Kimberly rolled her eyes, already rehearsing boredom, but my mother's hands stilled on the napkin. My father's jaw set, like he was bracing for turbulence. My high school graduation, I started. Remember that? You promised you'd be there. You even made me try on the white dress twice to make sure the hem was perfect for pictures. And then that morning Kimberly had a special event. What was it? A regional dance showcase? A recital? It doesn't matter. You texted me at lunch to say you were sorry, and I walked across that stage to the echo of other people's families. The only photos I have are from a friend's mom who thought I looked so serious it was cute. Kimberly exhaled through her nose. It was state, not regional. Right, I said. State. You sent me a balloon 2 days later. It arrived deflated. Mom flinched. Karen, that was a scheduling. My college graduation, I said over her. The one where Dad showed up late with the good camera and then spent an hour photographing Kimberly wearing my cap and gown. Just try it on, you said. You look so adorable. I stood there holding your purse, Mom, while Dad kept saying, Kim, chin up, beautiful. When I asked for one photo of me alone, you told her to scoot in because sisters should be together. The only picture of me solo is a blurry shot from the end when the battery died. Dad's face went a shade darker. You're rewriting. I'm remembering, I said. There's a difference. Kimberly folded her arms. So we're really doing the greatest hits of Resentments tour. We're doing the part where I stopped pretending it didn't happen. I felt my own breath steady. It was strange, the way anger could feel like rain that finally breaks sticky heat. My 24th birthday, I continued. I was working nights as a nurse then. I came over here after a shift. You put a candle in a store-bought cupcake. It had a dent in the frosting where someone had poked it. You handed me a card that said, to a special daughter, with $5 tucked inside and a note about how proud you were of me for sticking with nursing while you figured out what you wanted. Kimberly opened her gift after me. It was an iPhone. The new one. Everyone clapped when she peeled the plastic off. Kimberly shrugged, a little defensive. It was a family plan thing. But it was a message, I said. They all were. My milestones were errands you squeezed in between hers. My mother's voice softened, the way it always did when she tried to pad hard edges with apology shaped like misunderstanding. You were never less loved. You were never less cared for, Dad added, as if those words had the power to rearrange years. I lifted my palms an inch, not in surrender, just to hold them off. This isn't about whether you loved me. This is about what you valued me for. I learned early that if I brought home money or solutions, I got a seat at the table. If I brought home achievements without a price tag attached, I got a pat on the head and a reminder to be happy for my sister. Kimberly let out a brittle laugh. So I'm the villain because people liked me? You're my sister, I said quietly. You were the sun in this house, and I was the generator in the basement. They only thought about me when the lights needed to stay on. Dad's eyes flicked to the black folder in my bag like it might explain me better than I could. We pushed you because we believed in your capability. You pushed me because I was reliable, I said. Because you could hand me a crisis and I'd fix it without making you look bad. I became a wallet when you needed tuition patched. I became a workhorse when the clinic could absorb your favors. Mom's mouth trembled. We did our best. You did what was convenient, I answered, not cruelly, just finally. And, because I was strong enough to carry it, you kept loading me. That's not my best. That's my back. Kimberly looked at the lilies like they might offer a prettier memory. You want me to forget, I said, because the forgetting makes you better parents and a better sister. But remembering is how I stop letting it happen again. I remember the times you needed a ride at midnight and I drove across town because the Uber surge was insane. I remember the dentist bill I paid on my credit card because Dad's insurance paperwork got confusing. I remember the week I slept at the clinic, showering at 5 a.m., so I could afford to cover Mom's sessions without looking at the clock. Kimberly's voice came out small for once. You make me sound like I never did anything for you. I didn't say that, I replied. I'm saying what I did for everyone became my identity in this family. If I wasn't paying, fixing, covering, arranging, I was invisible. And when I refused to be invisible anymore, you called it selfish. Dad's chair creaked as he leaned back. What do you want from us now? An apology for every slight? A ledger. I want recognition, I said. That I wasn't imagining it. That the girl who stood alone at her graduation wasn't being dramatic. That the woman who opened a card while her sister opened a phone wasn't ungrateful. That your daughter, the one who became the generator, gets to step upstairs and sit at her own table. No one answered. For once, they weren't arguing their case. They were looking at me as if I were someone they hadn't met yet, someone who looked like me but took up more room. You don't have to agree, I said finally. You just have to hear it. I reached for my bag. The room felt different, emptier, but honest. I didn't know if they'd ever say the words I wanted. I did know this. I'd said mine. A month later, they texted a neutral group chat named Family Talk and invited me to discuss things like adults. The location was a cafe off Peachtree, the kind with subway tile, succulents in tiny clay pots, and a chalkboard menu full of syrups I couldn't pronounce. I arrived early on purpose. I wanted a table with good light and a clear path to the door. I ordered a black coffee and claimed a corner table by the window. Outside, traffic pulsed and slowed at the light. Inside, plates clinked and milk steamed. I laid out my materials the way I'd prep an eval. Stack, tab, summary sheet on top. They arrived together, like a procession. My mother first, lipstick, pearls, the particular tightness around her eyes she wore for appointments. Then my father in a blazer that tried too hard to be casual. And finally Kimberly, whose sunglasses were still on even though the day was gray. The hostess motioned. They spotted me and approached with smiles that didn't touch their pupils. Karen, Mom said, placing her bag carefully at her feet. Thank you for being reasonable. I'm being clear, I said. Dad glanced at the counter. Let's order first, he suggested, as if hydration might make what he wanted easier to swallow. They returned with drinks. Mom's cappuccino wearing a leaf, Dad's Americano, Kimberly's iced thing frothing under a lid. So, Dad began, lacing his fingers together like he did when he pitched a client. We agree the last dinner was tense. Emotions high. We thought a cooling-off period would help. We're here to reset. To talk like adults. Adults keep records, I said. I tapped the first folder and slid it halfway across the table. You keep saying family is business. I'd like to show you the business you've been doing with my name. My mother blinked. Karen, that's not. I opened the folder. On top were color printouts of Facebook posts with timestamps and tiny gray globes. I turned them so the captions faced them. In one, my mother had posted a photo of our waiting room at Christmas. Tree twinkling, basket of candy canes, my branded mugs lined like soldiers. Her caption read, "So proud of our family clinic's growth this year. Couldn't do it without our team. Hashtag family business." In another, my father posed in front of the clinic's exterior after a repaint, arms crossed like a proprietor. "Fresh coat for our family practice," his caption boasted. "Keeping Atlanta moving." A third post showed Kimberly holding a clipboard behind the front desk at our clinic making Monday happen with 3 flexed bicep emojis. "I asked you to stop," I said as calmly as I could. Multiple times. I made it clear, it is not a family business. It is my clinic. Those words have consequences. Dad glanced at the printouts and gave a small, dismissive smile. "Come on, Karen. Social media fluff. Everyone knows it's your clinic." I flipped to the next page. A printout of a neighborhood forum thread where my mother had replied to a request for PT recommendations with, "We own a clinic, message me for the family discount." I placed it on top of the others like a cherry on a cake no one should be eating. Kimberly rolled the straw between her fingers. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" I said. I opened the second folder. Unauthorized outreach. These were letters and emails. On my left, I laid out 2 printed emails my father had sent to Southern Medical Alliance addresses he'd scraped from Nowhere Good, to whom it may concern, as a representative of our family clinic. I am interested in exploring buy-in options for additional equity or advisory roles. Our family's involvement has been integral to the clinic's success, and we are prepared to formalize this through an ownership structure. He had CC'd his golf buddy, who replied with a thumbs-up emoji and "attaboy." Mom's hand flew to her chest. "Gregory," she began, turning to him. I continued, a PDF of a letter on his accounting firm's letterhead to one of our vendor reps suggesting a partnership discount for family-owned clinics, signed with his looping signature. A screenshot of a LinkedIn message he'd sent to a hospital liaison who feeds us post-op referrals. "My daughter's family clinic is expanding. Happy to discuss sponsorship packages." He'd included his cell. I watched the color slide out of his face like someone had opened a drain. "You went behind my back and told my partners and my referral sources that you had authority," I said. "You don't." "That's not what he started." "It's exactly what you wrote," I replied. I tapped the dates. "After our last conversation. After I told you to stop." Kimberly blew her straw wrapper into her palm and set it down. "Okay, but look, you're acting like this is a courtroom. It's family. We're proud of you. And we want to be part of it." My voice went colder than the cafe's air conditioning. Being proud of me doesn't come with voting rights. And wanting to be part of it isn't the same as having earned a part of it. Mom tried for soothing. "Honey, you're escalating. We just came to talk like adults." "Here is adult," I said, and pulled out a single-page letter on my attorney's stationery. "A cease and desist drafted this morning." I didn't slide it to them yet. I let them see the header first. It outlines the representations you are prohibited from making, the contacts you are prohibited from approaching on my behalf, and the statements you must retract. If this continues, we will file. Not a family spat, an actual lawsuit. My father's jaw clenched, but his voice reached for blasé. "You wouldn't sue your own parents." "This is your last warning," I stated, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "If you present the clinic as a family business again, I will take you to court." The cafe noise thinned around us. Somewhere behind the counter, a barista tapped a portafilter too hard. My mother's mouth opened and closed. Kimberly's sunglasses finally slid up onto her head, as if seeing me required unobstructed vision. Dad leaned in, lowering his voice like we were about to exchange state secrets. "Karen, think about Thanksgiving. About how this looks." About boundaries," I said. "Yes. Think about those." I turned to Mom. "You will delete the posts and write that you misspoke." To Dad, you will send retractions to every person you contacted, clarifying you have no authority. To Kimberly, you will remove anything that implies you work at my clinic. There will be no more R. There will be no more family rates. There will be no more you. Kimberly's cheeks flushed a furious pink. You got everything, she snapped, her voice rising so quickly a couple at the next table looked over. And I got nothing. A waiter passing behind her turned at the volume, his tray stacked with iced lattes and plates of avocado toast. For a split second, the whole cafe stilled, the soft hiss of steam, the murmur of conversations, the clatter of cups. Kimberly's words hung there, bright and brittle. You got everything, and I got nothing. Then the waiter's shoe caught on a chair leg, the tray tilted, gravity shrugged. For lattes slid in slow motion, an avalanche of milk and coffee and ice, a plate skidded, toast cartwheeling, silverware chimed against tile. Time snapped back to normal with a crashing chorus. Cold coffee burst across the floor, ice cubes skittered like marbles. Some people gasped. One person laughed. The barista said, "Oh my God," in a single breath. The waiter froze, cheeks flaming. Kimberly whipped around, half standing, hands lifted in outrage like she'd been personally attacked by physics. It would have been tragic if it hadn't been so absurd. The scene had the slapstick timing of a stand-up routine, my sister's declaration of cosmic injustice punctuated by a caffeine monsoon. A woman dabbed her sandal with napkins, a man in a suit picked up his laptop and shook a single droplet off its edge. The cafe owner materialized with a yellow caution, wet floor sign like a prop in a sketch. My mother hissed, "Kim, sit." My father glared at the mess, as if it were a misallocation of assets. Kimberly muttered, "Unbelievable," to no one and everyone. I slid the cease and desist across the table at last. "Sign the acknowledgement so my attorney knows you received it," I said evenly. "You'll get the digital copy by email." Dad started to sputter something legacy, image, overreaction, but the sound of mopping and the squeak of the caution sign reduced even his voice. I tucked the remaining printouts into my tote, closing the folders with a soft, final pat. "Karen," Mom said, a pleading note at last. "Please. We can fix this." "You can," I said, standing. "Start by telling the truth. Then stop talking for me." For a heartbeat, I let the picture burn into memory. My father pinched at the bridge of his nose, my mother's pearls askew, Kimberly blinking at the shiny puddle like the world had spilled on her. Somewhere, a baby giggled at the reflective floor. The barista apologized. The waiter whispered thank you to a stranger, handing him napkins. I slung my tote over my shoulder. The door chimed softly as someone came in, bringing a thread of cool street air. I looked at them one last time. Not as a daughter begging, not as a wallet waiting, not as a workhorse braced for orders. As a woman with documents and a boundary. I meant what I said, I reminded them. Last warning. Then I gathered my papers, stepped around the bright yellow sign, and left the cafe to its ordinary choreography, the clatter and hiss and laughter closing behind me like a curtain. A year later, I stand at the second-floor window of the center with a clipboard in my hand and the ordinary miracle of a Monday humming beneath me. The sign out front reads Mitchell Physical Therapy and Wellness, and the line of cars in the lot starts before 8 a.m. We outgrew the old space in spring. Now there are 8 treatment rooms, 2 gait labs, a pediatric nook with foam tiles, and a bright studio where we run balance classes for seniors and injury prevention clinics for high school athletes. 18 therapists work here, 18 plus 4 aides, 2 front desk rock stars, and a billing coordinator who could charm a claim out of a stone. There's a 2-month waiting list, which used to terrify me and now simply means our triage system is doing its job. Every Friday, a portion of our revenue moves automatically into the Veterans Access Fund. We built it quiet and sturdy, free evaluations, 12 no-cost follow-up visits, transportation vouchers if needed, and a partnership with a local nonprofit that helps with housing and job placement. On those afternoons, the lobby fills with service dogs, caps embroidered with units and jokes told in the shorthand of people who have seen things and live to laugh anyway. I do many of those sessions myself. My team has become my real family, not because we say so, but because we behave that way. We celebrate small wins, the first knee bend past 90 degrees, the day a stroke patient lifts a coffee mug with the good and bad hands and forgets which is which. We stock the break room like a refuge, clementines, decent coffee, a shelf of favorite mugs labeled with inside jokes. We rotate playlists in the gym, Motown Mondays, Throwback Thursdays, and keep a jar where patients drop song requests with a story attached. On the wall behind the front desk, a corkboard blooms with thank you notes and a faded crayon drawing of me, allegedly, wearing a superhero cape made of kinesio tape. Administrative life isn't my cross to bear anymore. Southern Medical Alliance runs the back office like a Swiss watch, compliance audits, payer negotiations, HR. I still read the reports, ask too many questions, and veto anything that smells like cutting corners on care. But I end most days with chalky hands from the balance boards and the pleasant fatigue of having been useful in the way that fits me best. Sometimes I check the waiting list and remember the nights I slept on the clinic couch, terrified it would all fall apart. Now, when fear knocks, it finds support beams, systems, people, values in writing. We conduct monthly case conferences. We fund continuing education. We mentor grad students. On Tuesdays, the new therapists crowd into my office with their laptops and impossible cases, and the kind of energy that makes me believe our little corner of Atlanta is stronger than the headlines suggest. Home is quieter, too. No ambush dinners. No texts from relatives asking for a little inside rate, as if my livelihood were a clearance rack. The group chat still exists, but it mostly circulates recipes and birthday reminders. I answer when I want, and I mute when I need. In March, an envelope arrived from my mother, handwritten address, no exclamation points on the name. Inside was a photo from a charity fair, her at a booth selling potholders to raise money for the community garden, cheeks flushed, hair frizzed by humidity, smile real. No note of instructions, no you should know about the clinic. Just the image, and on the back, 2 words, proud of you. I stood at my kitchen counter and let myself feel that sentence land without arguing with it. Maybe it was the closest she could come to an apology. Maybe it was a truce. Either way, it was the first letter she'd sent that wasn't carrying a demand. Kimberly found a job at a call center out in Decatur, benefits, steady pay, the kind of structure she used to call boring and now calls good for me. She posts about her team's monthly potlucks and her personal best for calls resolved. She has stopped mentioning my clinic. When we run into each other at our parents' house, the conversations are ordinary in a way that is almost tender. Her latest attempt to keep a fiddly fig alive, a meme about cats. Dad and I have settled into a cautious civility. He sends clippings about innovative PT programs with a sticky note that says, interesting, in his blocky handwriting. I send him tickets to the Veterans 5K we sponsor each fall, and he shows up in a volunteer vest, handing out bananas like it's the first job he's ever done without a title. We don't talk about the cafe. We don't talk about the letters he wrote. We talk about the Braves and his shoulder, which finally stopped clicking after he actually completed his home exercises. I can finally treat people while maintaining my self-respect. A courier drops off a package at the front desk, a box of new resistance bands and, tucked on top, a note from our alliance liaison. You're one of the centers we point to when people ask what good looks like. This place is my work. It is also my life. Not because I owe it my blood, but because I choose it every morning I unlock the door. And it will never again be a family business on paper. When I close the blinds at night, I feel what I once thought only other people found, not triumph, exactly, but dignity. The kind that doesn't need witnesses to be real. Family can be the sweetest word, or the most poisonous one. For years, I thought loyalty meant giving in, sacrificing myself, and letting others take pieces of me in the name of love. But standing in my clinic today, I know the truth. Loyalty without respect is just exploitation. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you were the one expected to give, to sacrifice, to stay quiet while others took credit or demanded more. Maybe your hard work was treated like a family asset, free to be divided at their whim. If so, then you understand how deeply betrayal from your own blood can cut. And now I want to ask you, have you ever had to defend what you built from the very people who should have celebrated you? I would love to read your own stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe buttons because there are more family dramas ahead that will challenge everything you thought you knew about loyalty, love, and betrayal.